Hello, and welcome to Stories from the View, an award-winning podcast from the Pleasant View Senior Center in East Longmeadow, Massachusetts. On this podcast, we invite East Longmeadow residents to tell us their stories about their lives and events. And we have a very special guest today, Jeff Teden, who is a member of our podcast committee here at the Senior Center. And he's here to talk with our host, Mary Jenowyn Kaplan.
Thank you, Eric. Good morning, Jeff.
Hi, Mary.
And today we are having a podcast to commemorate Alcohol Awareness Month. And I will admit, I was pretty excited this morning to have one of our own here at the table, not only because I'm anxious to hear your story, but I figure it'll be easy lifting for us because you know how to do this. Let's start. And this is a kind of a loaded question, but I know you, Jeff, you're going to start with a bang. Tell me, how long has it been since you've had an alcoholic beverage?
The last time I drank any kind of adult beverage was October of 1983, over 40 years ago.
Wow. And what has happened since then? Tell us about your journey.
I'm glad you asked. We'll start the whole thing at the beginning. My parents drank. I don't believe they ever drank to excess or anything. They just made the parental decision that if myself, my sister, or brother wanted to drink, far better to drink in the house under their supervision than for us to go out with our friends and possibly get into trouble. Anybody who knew me when I came out of high school would not begin to believe, well, there goes a guy who's going to have a problem. I went to a small college in Ohio, ironically, a dry school in a dry town. Just because the campus was dry didn't mean there weren't any off-campus parties, and just because the town was dry didn't mean there were any out-of-town watering holes. This is embarrassing. It was the first time I got drunk when I was in college. I don't think that's unique in this world.
No.
But again, coming out of college, I don't believe anybody would be thinking he's going to have a problem later on in life. I got friendly with a guy in school. He graduated the year behind me. His name is going to come up throughout. His name's Wally. He told me he came from a family of teetotalers. He did not go to college to make up for lost time drinking-wise or anything. Just like me, he'd go out for a beer here, a beer there, that kind of thing. No big deal. The fall after he graduated, he returned to the campus for homecoming. Now, I know I'm going to sound like I'm going off on a tangent. Everything's going to be relatable. He bumped into one of his classmates, a woman that he had been carrying a torch for 4 years, and she wouldn't give him the time of day.
Oh.
Well, she was talking to her sorority sisters and was stunned. They were married, they were engaged, and she was a 22-year-old spinster. So she developed a whole new appreciation for Wally. They hooked up and ended up getting married. Well, shortly after that, I did likewise, and I got married. The common denominator is both of us definitely married wrong. He told me some of the things he went through. I let him know some of the things I went through. He and his wife split, and I snail mailed a letter to him to let him know my wife and I split. I just didn't give it a thought. Well, he called me one Sunday afterwards, drunk as a skunk. He thought I was trying to keep up with him. You know, he got married, I got married, he went through a divorce, I went through a divorce. No, what am I doing? So I'm trying to tell him that our situations are different. Don't play a guilt trip on yourself. In those days, he worked an overnight job. He told me he went to work that night, hungover, mouthed off to a supervisor, later apologized. The company maintained his position and sent him to a detox center. So that was my introduction to the reality of alcoholism. He told me it was very interesting going there. He never gave this a thought, and he used aftershave. It was confiscated because some people are so alcohol dependent they would drink aftershave for the alcohol content. He wasn't that bad, at least I don't think. This opened my eyes again to the reality of alcoholism. So I looked how I was drinking. And of course, like anybody who drank, I came up with I don't have a problem. I don't drink to get drunk, which was true. Unfortunately, there was a red flag starting to raise its ugly head. Back in those days, we're talking the early 1980s, I played recreational ice hockey. I inherited the team cooler. After every game, the guys would pony up a couple bucks apiece. I would get beer and soda for the following week's game. And I would bring whatever wasn't consumed home. On more than one occasion, after I had a couple beers in the locker room following a game, I couldn't make the short jaunt from Enfield to Springfield without popping a can of beer in the car. Now, I got very lucky in that I got away with it. But this is in the back of my mind now. Do I have a problem? And of course, my response is, yeah, I didn't get caught. No big deal. My father married my stepmother in the spring of '83. That summer, late in the summer, she invited me over for dinner one Sunday. Now, I made two mistakes. I got there on time, and I got there on an empty stomach. She greeted me. She goes, would you like to have something to drink? I happened to see a bottle of scotch on the counter. So, yes. So I made up scotch and water. And I had that thing down in maybe 5 minutes, and it tasted good. So I went back out for number two, on an empty stomach, mind you. I was halfway through it when, it hit me hard. But I finished that one, and I was still thirsty. So I went out for number three. I was winding that one down when Mary said, dinner's ready. Now, I remember my oldest stepbrother, Ed, and his wife, Debbie, were there. I don't remember if anybody else was there. I rinsed out the glass. I drank nothing but water with the meal, and I planned to eat as much as I could to sop up all that scotch in me. Well, this is good strategy, except for one little thing. My stepmother must have used cooking wine in the food. So the more I ate, the worse I got. After dinner, I went into the bathroom. I just sat on the floor, very comfortable, relaxed. All of a sudden, I heard a voice say, hey, where'd Jeff go? I looked at my watch. 20 or 30 minutes had gone by. I had passed out. So I thought, uh-oh. I flushed the toilet, started washing my hands. Hey, I'll be right out. Came out, well, game over. Everybody had an embarrassed look on their face. My father said, I'm going to drive you home. So I said, well, how are you going to get home? Mary's going to follow me. Ew, game definitely over. You talk about a quiet car ride. I mean, what is the father going to say to his son the first time he does this, and what's the son going to say to his father? So we got home, and I thanked him. The following day I got up, I called, and I said, I apologize for what had happened. I said, quite frankly, I really don't know what happened. But I don't know if I have a problem. I'm going to be checking into it, and you can't say much after that. And that's what I did. This was in late summer of 1983. I discovered a AA meeting in downtown Springfield. I don't know if it's still active today. I don't know any local AA schedule, so please don't ask. It was a good meeting in that they had a beginner's meeting prior to a regular meeting. So I was in attendance, and I just decided right then and there, okay, Wally said, if you think you have a problem, you probably do. I've dodged bullets. I better get it together. So I made the decision right then and there. I did make decisions that go against the grain of AA, so any listeners, don't follow what I did.
You found your own path.
Yeah. Let's see. One of the things I did, which I know people are going to frown on, is I hate wasting stuff, and I like 3 or 4 cans of beer at home and a little bit of a bottle of bourbon. So I quit drinking when I finished what I had. Let's see. AA highly recommends taking on a sponsor. The idea behind a sponsor is if you feel in need that you might go off the wagon, you pick up the phone and you call. Now, quite frankly, I did not want to be a sponsor for anybody because I didn't want to be at the beck and call of somebody. And I felt that if I was unwilling to be a sponsor, I had no right to take on a sponsor. So that's what I did or didn't do. No sponsor, and I wasn't a sponsor. This is just my personal observation that AA, and I'm not knocking that or any other support group, they don't really do a whole lot to foster a sense of independence. Getting back to my friend Wally, he was going to 6 and 7 meetings a week. I don't know if he was that bad or if he didn't trust himself or what the story is. I decided that when I felt comfortable in my own skin not to attend, I was just going to stop attending and not be dependent or anything and just make my way in the world. The last thing I did is we obviously live in a world that drinks, don't we, Mary?
We do. We do.
And I couldn't really expect the world to adapt themselves to the fact that I quit drinking. I figured I had to adapt myself to the world that drinks. I can be in any environment where drinking is going on, and I just don't bat an eye. It means nothing to me at all.
You have a very strong constitution.
Thank you. If, say, I'm invited to a cookout and I know the beer is going to be flowing and beer was my drink of choice, I'll just pull the host and hostess aside prior to the event and just tell them, look, I quit drinking. Nobody has to feel weird because of this. And I'm even cool if somebody out of politeness says, hey, can we get you a beer? The only area where I'll get my back up is if I say, no, thank you, but could you get me a can of soda or something? And my no isn't good enough, and they want to challenge you. Come on, what's the matter? You can't take just one? So, I've never really had to deal with that. And as I said, over 40 years and counting. And as they say, I did, one day at a time. Now that you know my story, I have some other interesting tidbits I like to go into about this. Anybody going to an AA meeting is going to be stunned how it crosses all socioeconomic levels. It's just a cross-section of our society. Rich, poor, black, white, it doesn't matter. You go to an AA meeting, you're going to see everybody there. Let's see. And it literally obviously can happen to anybody. Alcohol dependence is strictly on the person, not the bottle. I understand something like 71% of the adult population drink. 1 out of 15 will become alcohol dependent. And there are things you can do with this to check on yourself. You got a monthly calendar, be honest, mark down the number of drinks you have on a daily basis. Let's see, you can be asking yourself, how long have I been drinking? How much do I drink on a daily basis? How often do I drink? When do I drink and why do I drink? Has the amount and the frequency of drinking increased? Do you feel you cannot have a good time without a drink? Do you drink on a signal like a Pavlov's rat? Through the years, while I was putting this together, I was thinking of some people I know that alcohol had an adverse effect on their lives. Cindy was married. She and her husband were living locally. One night, her husband went out to run some errands. Unfortunately, there was a guy, his errands was bar hopping. I don't know how bad he was, and I don't know how many drinks he had at his last stop, but he crashed into Cindy's husband's vehicle, killing him, making her a young widow. This next person I want to mention, this guy I went to school with. By no stretch of the imagination was this guy a troublemaker. But in school, he was a buffoon, a class clown, a cut-up. He got away with a lot of these shenanigans because he was blessed with an extraordinary athletic ability. At a long ago reunion, we discovered that he died, alcoholism. Apparently, what worked in school just wasn't cutting the mustard in the real world, and he couldn't come to terms with that. This next pairing, excuse me,
It's okay.
Gary was my age. He never saw a can of beer that he didn't want to pop open. He was killed in a drunk driving accident. He was a driver. Excuse me. The second guy I want to mention, he was married. He told me that he and his wife were very happy. Their agenda was to enjoy life together. They had a daughter. About 5 or so years after their daughter was born, her mother, Pete's wife, passed away. She was in her mid-30s. And he went into a tank. He knew he was a single parent taking care of a young child. But his agenda was excessive drinking and promiscuous sex. They found somebody for the latter. She got pregnant. They got married. As happy as he was with wife number one, that's what a disaster wife number two was. Furthermore, stepmother and stepdaughter did not like each other. So a divorce was obviously inevitable. He was so strapped, all he could afford was a one-bedroom apartment. The daughter had the bedroom, he slept on a couch. I started hearing stuff that he would go to work very hungover to the extent they would send him home. Instead of this being a wake-up call that he lost a day's pay, it gave him more time to drink, putting him in a vicious cycle. We've lost touch with each other, but if you told me he was alive today, I would be one of the most stunned people you ever want to meet. Recently, I overheard a young woman at Union Station. She couldn't have been more than in her mid-20s. She was talking to somebody that she's now going to meetings and has a sponsor. I don't know if it's alcohol or what, but this is a young woman, can't be older, as I said, in her mid-20s. Was this voluntarily, or did a judge volunteer her to go because she was getting in trouble? I don't know. Then another day I was on a bus, a guy started talking to me, and out of the blue he just said, "Do you drink?" And I said, "Well, no, I quit." He goes, "How long has it been?" So I told him, and he was astounded. He said, "I made it 5 years, and I couldn't help it. I went off the wagon." Well, I was about to get off the bus, so I wished him well, and I just said, "Look, don't focus on me, focus on one day at a time. That's all you got to do." And I wish, both of them well. Now, if you think those stories are crazy, you ain't heard nothing yet. I was at an AA meeting. They had a pair of speakers come in from New York City, a man and a woman. The woman said she would go out at night, and when she woke up in the morning, she literally did not know if she was in New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut. The guy's story was even crazier than that, if you can believe it. It wasn't so much he was alcohol dependent. It was almost like the industry was dependent on him. He couldn't keep a job because undoubtedly he would arrive at work drunk or at least hungover. He couldn't keep a roof over his head because whenever he got money, it went to booze. He was reduced to staying with a friend here or a family member, that sort of thing. But those situations couldn't last too long because his drinking was dominating that household. His wake-up call came in the following manner, and if I didn't hear this with my own ears, I wouldn't believe it. He got sick, and it was a shock, and his puke was black. That's when he decided, gee, I think I might have a problem. And look at all the fun I've missed in 40 years. Now, there are some things you can do to see about your drinking habits, and you have to be honest with yourself. Then I can give you some lifelines to get the help if you feel you need the help. Okay, let's see. I started mentioning some questions before about drinking and, how long have you been drinking? Do you drink on signal? That sort of thing. You have to be honest with yourself. If you lie to yourself, everything's going to go down the tubes. Nothing's going to happen. These are the things you can do to quit. You keep a very accurate record of the drinks you take. Do not drink daily. If you feel like you need a drink, don't. Space your drinks. Take the second drink half an hour after the first. Take the third an hour after the first. I don't even think of taking a fourth. Dilute the alcohol by sticking to long, weak drinks. Break the habit of drinking on signal. And something I heard when I was in college about the best way to remove a hangover is by drinking, don't. Now, if anybody feels they might have a drinking problem, again, you got to be honest with yourself. And that's basically it. You have to be upfront and honest. As Wally said, if you think you have a problem, you probably do. The first thing you should do to get help is talk to your employers or your spouse's employer about their employee assistance program to see where you can get help, whether it's local meetings or detox center if needed. If for some reason that doesn't help, you talk to your family physician, you talk to your clergyman. I have been seeing commercials on television for people with any kind of an addiction. It's an addiction treatment hotline staffed by recovering addicts 24/7. People who've been there, done that. This toll-free number is 1-800-727-0984. That's 800-727-0984. I'd just like to end up with a couple of points here. I saw this article in the February-March issue of Guidepost magazine. This is actually a quote. Surrender is the strongest, most subversive thing you can do in this world. It takes strength to admit you are weak, bravery to show you are vulnerable, courage to ask for help. The person who wrote this, her name is Holly Whitaker. She's a writer and speaker on recovery. I'd just like to wrap up by saying, Wally, I know we've lost track with each other. I hope you stay the course. May you clean. You're clean and sober. And one of the want to thank you for opening my eyes to the realities of alcoholism.
Deep breath. Thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing your powerful story, your insightful observations over the years, tips, research. This was so moving, and we appreciate your telling your story.
Thank you.
So that wraps up another episode of Stories from the View. We'd like to thank our guest very much, Jeff Teden, from our podcast committee, to be here today. The Stories from the View podcast, it's available on the LCAT 01028 channel on YouTube, and we're also on Spotify. If you have a story that you'd like to share on the program, contact Pleasant View Senior Center Director Erin Kobler by stopping by the Pleasant View Senior Center, by calling Erin at 413-525-5436, extension 1401, or you can send Erin an email, erin.kobler@eastlongmeadowma.gov. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Stories from the View.